Is that okay? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So let's get started then. So good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. I'm very honored to be able to speak with you and present. And we are going to talk, I think I have 30 minutes and to talk about content delivery in modern times. Just as an introduction here. So what we do, who I am, so I'm the founder of a company called Antidote, and we have one product only, which is Free Topics, and we do content delivery, which is a content delivery platform. So the purpose of such a tool is to aggregate, collect any content type that comes around a use case, which is technical documentation, product documentation, regardless of how it has been created. And I think you had a few talks about that, whether it's structured content, unstructured content, written by humans, generated by bots, however you write that content, where it comes from. And usually in those companies, you have multiple silos for where the knowledge is created and managed. And we are in charge of aggregating all that knowledge to create a single repository of knowledge, so that then you can disseminate that content to any touch point where it is needed and feed different use cases. So that's the idea of separating the authoring, the management, the creation of content from the delivery of content, which has become, and it's becoming more and more versatile and complex and subtle, that it requires a dedicated specific tool and layer for that, which is what we do. So the use case for us is really we help our customers achieve a digital transformation in customer support and field service operations, which are the two main use cases we see. And that this is something that is important for software vendors, machine tools, medical devices vendors, as well complex processes that you can find now in bank, finance, insurance. So there's a lot of domains where things are changing when it comes to delivering content in a new way and feeding new processes. To give you a sense of sort of the type of customers that we have, and it's very wide in terms of domain. It goes from, you see here a few software vendors, financial with Visa, semiconductor industry, with AMD, Xilinx, analog devices, Texas Instruments, manufacturing elevators. All of those companies have complex challenges to get more efficient. And if you look at, so content, the way content has been written, has evolved, and it will evolve faster in the future, I think, as well, with, I think, as you discussed previously, with those new ways of writing and probably generative AI. But the delivery itself has been pretty much the same for many, many years. It used to be on paper for decades and decades. I mean, TechDoc used to be really those binders that were put inside the boxes, shipped with the product, usually then stored in cabinets and forgotten there. So that has been the paradigm and the way of working for probably, let's say, a few hundred years almost, since product exists and TechDoc exists. It's only, say, 25 years ago that we've seen this first evolution where TechDoc evolved from paper to a dematerialized version of the paper, which is the PDF. It's not really digital transformation here. It's just going from paper to zero and ones, because those were exactly the same documents, the same books. It's just you don't print them. Or at least you transfer the cost of printing to the customer, because reading a PDF is not very convenient. So customers most of the time were downloading, getting those PDFs and reprinting them on the site. So you're transferring the cost of printing to the customer. And we even see that in many cases, the PDF were still put on CD-ROM at the beginning or USB keys and shipped with the product in the boxes. So that even the delivery method itself, even though the document was not a binder book, but a PDF, the delivery itself was still very physical. Then at some point, companies started putting those PDFs on servers, initially FTP servers, for example, then built website with the advent of the web 20 years ago, 25 years ago, put the PDF there, and to some extent, at some point, started as well generating HTML. and replacing PDF with HTML or providing a mix of PDF and HTML. So that's pretty much what content delivery is still for many, many, many companies. And this is what we call static content delivery, which is you get that content, you generate HTML or PDFs, you put that somewhere, you add a search engine on top of it, plus reading capabilities, like a website for HTML, or if it's PDF, it's just your download, in fact. So if you look at it, what is static then? It means that it's pre-generated content, it's rigid, because once you have generated the PDF, that's the document. You cannot change it. You have to change that before generation and recreate the document and recreate a new PDF and put that again on the website. It's pre-generated, rigid, the same. As an example, the table of content is fixed. That's the same document, the same table of content for everyone, regardless of your needs, the situation, the context. Okay? Always the same content. The look and feel as well, the styling is preset, is predefined, and you cannot adapt that dynamically to the user or the device, meaning that if you get this PDF, whether you read it on a large laptop, a tablet, or mobile, there's going to be the same PDF. Or even for HTML, it's pretty much the same. And the access as well is very preset, and the granularity is basically either the doc itself, the PDF, or if it's pre-generated HTML page, it's going to be the page. So that's the granularity. That's how you can access that content. And let's look at what we mean now by dynamic content delivery and the dynamic documents. What is dynamic content? Well, that's content that you assemble on the fly. It's not pre-generated. For example, the table of content of the same document can vary depending on the context and can be inserted and removed from the master document, the template document, depending on the situation. It's not even hidden, it's really removed. So you almost imagine, which is the case of what we do with some customers, the table of content itself can be the result of a query, and depending on the configuration of the device you are servicing, you can remove all the needs of the user, the field technician, or even the skills of the technician. You can remove part of that content so that it's not used and people don't start doing maintenance tasks that they have not been certified to do. So you can really dynamically include or remove in the document that you show that part of the content. You can even adapt the rendering of the content itself to the user and the device. I mean, the fonts can change the size, the way you display the images or the 3D models about when you are describing a task to do can adapt, because if you are looking at a task to achieve on a small device, maybe you won't display a 3D model that people can engage with, but more like a static small image or fragment that. And so you see, you adapt the content dynamically as well to the display and to the device. And the content itself must be very fragmented and then can be individually accessed and retrieved. So you can point to a piece of fragment, any part of information inside the document or separated from a document even, and you can display that in context somewhere on a small screen. So it's not like you provide the entire document necessarily, but you can provide or access directly, point to a very, very specific of that content. So that's the idea of dynamic versus static. So static content is one size fits all, as dynamic means contextual to the user, to the device, to the need. So if you look at it, this is what dynamic content delivery means. So from the source content that you get from your authoring tools and silos, you have to build a graph, a knowledge graph, keep content granularity alive, apply enrichment, language models, and so forth. And from that fine-grained knowledge repository, you can start deriving advanced use cases, which is, for example, personalizing the search experience, enriching the content, classifying, extracting entity, for example, to create dynamic parts checklist or tools list when people go on the field to let them know what they need to take with them in the truck. Or that's where you can, because you have this granularity of content, compute the embeddings and connect with generative AI, or serve instructions step by step, which is dynamic granularity, to feed more modern devices such as augmented reality devices. So what I show you here is not science fiction at all. So the idea of today was also to show you that those use cases of delivering TEF content in new ways is already what's happening on the field. And we do have customers that have started changing the way they deliver content and are in those sort of use cases. So let me give some examples here. So again, the idea of having these granular, enriched content repositories and serving that content dynamically is being able to enable those new information services. And this is also called content as a service. So typical ways of delivering content to new channels can be inline help, whether it's a product, but as well, you see in-device help. It's like displaying the content inside the device itself. Now, more and more devices can have screens that can be connecting to a field maintenance tool, help desk tools, mentioning chatbots, new chatbots, and I think everybody has in mind now what ChatGPT can do, or augmented reality devices, virtual reality devices. So concrete example, it's probably one of our first customers that we saw engaging in this direction is Kone. So Kone is the second or third elevator maker in the world. And that's an interesting use case because they have 1.2 million elevators installed in the world. And that was in 2017 when we started working with them. So I guess now it's maybe 1.3 million elevators. And part of the business is to maintain those devices, those elevators. And they do, believe it or not, it's huge. They do 70,000 maintenance operations per day everywhere in the world. And they have 23,000 field technicians. It's crazy. The key point here is that each elevator almost is unique. Because even if one building where initially two elevators are the same, because they have been designed the same way, in fact, they all evolve over time, and elevator last long. And at some point, because of maintenance, retrofit, the change of parts, they sort of diverge, and each elevator becomes a unique configuration over time. And which means that if you want to maintain one elevator, you need to provide the documentation that matches the configuration of that elevator, which means at some point you would need 1.2 million doc sets so that each doc set corresponds to one elevator. But you cannot maintain and generate 1.2 million doc sets. Like for this elevator, this is the documentation for the door opening mechanism, for the engine, for the command control. So it's very complex to do so. And they couldn't match these requirements. So that's where they realized that they needed to switch to dynamic content delivery because they could not pre-generate the content per elevator. So they reached out to us, selected us, started building a portal. But what is more interesting is that from the outset, and those are very smart people, they realized that they needed to go, and that's a slide, that's from a presentation they gave in 2017, the vision of the future, they called that at that time, 6 years ago. They wanted to move from, they called it PDF, to dynamic delivery and beyond. And you can see from those slides, those are screenshots from those slides, they said, we need our portal to act as a web service. So which are the keywords they wanted to explain? Content as a service, so that we can feed that content to different use cases. And you see those use cases they had in mind already at that time, and that they have achieved since then, which is maintenance instructions to maintenance technicians on mobile devices, not just documents. Delivering fault-finding topics, not documents, topics in a fault-finding situations, very fine-grained content. Installation instruction on fitting mobile devices. And they started working on augmented reality, and they made the first proof of concept in 2017 for guided maintenance in elevators and voice-activated maintenance. So if you're interested in that, because I know we're in an academic scholar discussion here, they have made lots of experience there and written papers that have published, and one of them is the i3org. So I give you the link here, and you can download. That's very interesting. They describe all the tests they've made by having guiding guided industrial maintenance. So that's a new way of delivering content. Another use case I find pretty interesting is we see customers that are now replacing books with QR codes. So, well, that's fun, but I mean, it's really interesting. DKG, for example, is a kitchen furniture leader in Europe and in Netherlands. And when they used to ship with the furniture to be installed, large, quite heavy books on how to install, how to do things. And they realized that's a lot of paper to be used only once, because you install the kitchen only once, the furniture on the wall everywhere only once, and then you throw away that paper. So they said it's stupid and it's not very convenient to use. So they got rid of the documentation. Also, again, here we are in a situation where each content has to be adapted to what you ship to an installer for one kitchen. And they wanted to seem dynamic, and as well the fact that for each different part of the kitchen, there should be a different access to the specific part of the documentation. So they generated QR codes, and instead of shipping books now, they just put one sheet of paper inside the boxes, as you can see, and it's just one QR code that the people can scan, the installer can scan, and just get access to the video what they need. So they made a video of that, pretty interesting, it's on YouTube. And we saw that another customer doing the same, getting fully rid of paper. And that's huge because it's JCI. So JCI is a huge conglomerate. I think they do 30 billion a year. They have 25 brands, major brands in HVAC. So they're in the building technology, fire safety, security, HVAC, and so forth. And they did the same, and they started a bit like 2-3 years ago. And just in 2022, they told us, you know, guys, we've done this with your product. So we have this granular content. So, so what we did now is for each different task and for each different device, we have generated QR codes that we put on the boxes, on the product. And guess what? Last year, for few product lines, not all of them yet, but already for few product lines, we have stopped printing any documentation, and we saved $4 million US, not printing anymore. And that was just the printing cost, they told us, not even including the shipping and all that, just the printing, direct printing cost. We saved 4 million first year, which is 43 million doc pages avoided. And you see the impact in terms of ESG transformations, like it's huge impact on CO2 saved and so forth. So very interesting use case. And again, this is the benefits we're talking about. It's not even the mechanism technologies. Really say, if we can have this content served dynamically, granularly, and people can have deep links to do one piece of content for doing one task, then we can replace a lot of things, make lives of those people easier, and for us getting benefits as well. Another example I can give you here is, and we started with that because it's trendy, but it's highly demanded by our customers. They all know what we want, what we can do, what they can do with ChatGPT and GenAI, and we started working on that as well. And that's very interesting because what I show you here is is a real example where we started connecting, and we did that for us. I'm showing you an example here on our tech doc. We starting using GenAI to reply automatically to support cases. So what you see here is a real support question in our help desk tool. So FTHD means Free Topics Help Desk. Ticket number is 2793, real one. And this is the question asked by a customer. And the question of that customer was, does Free Topics support publishing in ebook format? If so, is there a special connector? So do we output ebook? Not then we ingest it, not do we ingest in book, but do we output ebook? So very simple question, very short. And interestingly, we tried, so we have developed a mechanism so that we can leverage GenAI, and we said, okay, a good use case would be to write replies to cases automatically if we can. And this is what you see here is an answer generated by GenAI. And says, no, Free Topics does not currently support publishing in ebook format. However, it does provide PDF templates, blah, blah, blah. So it explained that no, we don't output ebook because speed of the past. And that's right. And what is interesting is there is nothing in our documentation that says we don't output ebook, because you describe what you do, not what you don't do. And this is the supporting documentation, by the way. And that's interesting because the GenAI was able to create a reply that is very sophisticated, that is truthful, even though there was nothing on ebook specifically. And you see, we can even back that with the sources that are behind. And it does things that are even more interesting. That's another real, the next ticket. So I could have done 20 like that, 2794. Real question, and you see that's by one of our customers, Teradata. And we have a connector to give you the context and show you how interesting it is. We have in Free Topics a connector where you can publish Word documents, Word files, and we chunk the Word files and we make them look like structured content. Not everybody, not every stakeholder in a company is writing in structured content, data format or something like that. You may still have experts that write a bunch of unstructured content, Word files, and we chunk that. We make it look like structured content. So we have a connector for that, and you can instruct the connector, configure the connector to tell how the maps, the styles are used in Word for the chunking. So it's called style map file. It's in the YAML file format. So you see here the customers ask a question which is quite technical, which is, I'd like more info about the style map.yaml file, how to use it for the Word connector. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. See attachment for the source Word file by Teradata, and they gave us a link. And guess what? This is what the GenAI has generated. We are pretty amazed. The answer is exactly not only to reply, not exactly what should be replied, but also the GenAI generated a sample style map file in YAML format to support the reply and to tell the customer what to do. And then we still have the backup documentation behind that we provide as well, that the customer can relate to, because that's very important, that we can back any reply that GenAI provides with the source documentation itself. So you see, that's interesting, because this is made possible if you have that content that is in the repository, because the way it works, and as you know, we don't fine-tune the language model. Here, we don't have an approach where we have taken our documentation and we have fine-tuned an LLM. We articulate the enterprise knowledge, the knowledge repository that we have with the language model that is separate from that. And you need that repository of fine-grained content so that, in fact, the process is the opposite. When you have such a question, here we first identify in the documentation what is the supporting part of documentation around the question. And in fact, then we hand over to the GenAI the question and the source, the source content that applies to that. And with prompt engineering, we tell to the GenAI, please, GenAI, you are a support agent. This is the question. Those are the 10, 20, 50, 100 pages of content around that subject. Can you write the reply? So it's a lot of prompt engineering here. And the first task is to be able to extract from the knowledge repository the content that is supporting, that should let you be able to reply to that question. So that's where you need the fine-grained repository and being able to extract from that repository the supporting knowledge for replying to the question. So this is where you don't work. If you want to make that work efficiently, you don't work with large documents. You know, you're limited in the size of the number of tokens you can give to dynamically to a GenAI. So you need to make sure that you extract from your repository the most accurate content that fits into the number of tokens you can provide to GenAI, which is why you need this granular content as well to make that work efficiently. So those are examples of what you can achieve with fine-grained content, and that if you, for serving the content to different channels, one of them being a GenAI. So now that we have in mind more what we can achieve with dynamic content, which are way more interesting use cases than just sending PDFs and binders. What does it take to get to dynamic content array? What do you need to achieve that? Again, I can only insist on that. First, we need granularity of content. Okay, not manipulating 100 pages PDFs, but really fine-grained pieces of content that we can assemble on the fly, reach out to directly, or extract from the repository. We need metadata as well, a lot of metadata. We need tagged content. We need to enrich the content. We need to be able to describe what a piece of content is about. So we need vocabularies around that. That can be product lines, product, language, type, version, audience, target audience. So this piece of content is for maintenance technicians, field technicians, R&D people, whatever. So we need to control, because everything has to be controlled. We are in a B2B environment, so it's not like everything is public. So we need this metadata sets and a lot of metadata around content. And we need semantics as well. So first, granularity. So you need to maintain existing or create granularity. This is one of the challenges we see in the tech doc business today, is that modern content, new content may be written in a granular way. Think formats like DITA, S1000D in the aeronautics. So it's very important that, and such delivery layers, the way we work, you have to maintain this granularity. Or again, if you are handed over content that is not already granular, you have to create the granularity. You have to chunk the content. Again, here you can chunk that using structural analysis of the content or semantic analysis of the content. So there are tons of ways and NLP methods for chunking that content, but you need to manipulate granular content. And once you have this granular content, this repository, that's where you can really extract those pieces of content and connect to the touch points and give exactly the piece of content that you need to serve in a smart glasses in augmented reality context or to a chatbot. I'll give you an example, which is interesting. I take 1 minute here. Because once you have this granular content, you have created a repository. When people read, at some point, it's not just step-by-step instruction that you deliver in smart glasses. In some point, you have as still to render that as a document for reading, and not just 10 lines, then click next, 10 lines. So you have to recreate something that looks like an entire document from this granular content that you store, which is interesting because you can then change the granularity of the pages themselves. You're not forced to render anything as one entire long document, or you can, but you can choose how you present the content, because in fact, what you store, you don't have pre-generated pages normally. You have a sort of a database, a graph of fine-grained content, but when you render that to the customer, to the end user, you have to recreate dynamically those pages. Okay, and that's interesting because that raises tons of questions working with very granular content and dynamic content, because you can in real time, you extract from your repository, you pull from the repository those fragments, and you have to recreate something for reading. And that could be one long page.
At least we have some minutes more.
1 minute. I have 1 minute.
Some minutes,
okay.
Some minutes, like 3-4 minutes.
Okay. So that can be, you can generate something that per chapter now at section level. So that's interesting because you can do even things like we do like rule-based, where you can choose how you reassemble the content, and based on the content types, based on the device, you can start rendering, assembling those fragments in different ways. So that open new ways and raise new questions on how to create pagination and rendering of content and how it should be done. So you need to apply rule-based engine on that, on top of that, which is pretty interesting. Then you need metadata, as I said. They can come from the content. They can be added to the content using machine learning, for example. So supervised learning for content classification. They can be manually tagged. You can use the wisdom of the crowd. So there are many ways, and that has been for long an open, well, not that open anymore, subject in the scientific subject. Now I think it's quite well known on how to do automatic tagging, but that's still something valuable here. So metadata are important. And the last part, which is becoming my last slide, you need semantics. You need to know, articulate that content and maybe put models on top of, like ontologies for modeling domain knowledge. I think you have different discussions this afternoon on that, or tomorrow on the subject of ontologies for modeling domain knowledge. And when I started writing that slide, which is my last slide you're going to see, I says, do we? And that becomes an interesting subject for me, because we've been into that for a long time, and suddenly, and that's a good controversy I want to open here. Do we still need ontologies in fact? Is semantic AI dead or not? And I say that because when we started working with GenAI and ChatGPT, and I've shown you an example a few slides ago on how we were replying automatically to cases opened by customers, and the quality of the replies on any type of question, and there is no ontology. If you use ChatGPT, and you can do crazy stuff with new approaches like chain of thought, and there is no formal modeling behind that, no ontology behind. And suddenly I started asking myself, my God, we've been working on modeling knowledge and deriving ontologies from what we do for a long time. But when I see what ChatGPT is able to do today, do we still need to do that? Do we need to engineer ontologies and describe formally the knowledge? And I think that's a very important subject to discuss. And at this stage, I don't have the reply yet. It's just something we started discussing internally a week or two ago internally in the company. And I think that how to articulate ontologies, formal knowledge, and GenAI is still is a new subject. That's a totally open scientific subject. And I think you're here, guys, and you have talks around that matter in the next hours or days. And I think that's going to be probably one of the good discussions to have. So I'm thinking by finishing with this slide, I'm just opening the next and creating a segue to the next discussion you will have.